The rust-colored dust of Mars swirled around Lieutenant Jake Morrison's boots as he patrolled the perimeter of Colony 7. Another beautiful day in paradise, he thought sarcastically, watching the atmospheric processors sputter and wheeze like dying animals. The irony wasn't lost on him that humanity had traveled 48 million miles just to slowly suffocate on a planet that looked like it had been painted by someone with anger issues. Control, this is Morrison. Sector 12 is clear, unless you count the exciting discovery of more red dirt and broken dreams. He spoke into his comm unit, the static crackling back at him like an old friend who'd grown tired of his jokes. The colony was dying, plain and simple. What started as humanity's grand gesture of interplanetary expansion had devolved into a glorified camping trip that nobody wanted to end. Food reserves were running dangerously low. The hydroponics bay had more failures than successes, and morale was somewhere between non-existent and completely shot to hell. Morrison kicked at a piece of debris from the latest equipment failure. The third atmospheric recycler this month. At this rate, they'd be breathing their own exhaust fumes by Christmas, assuming they made it that far. That's when he saw them point 3 ships, sleek as mercury and silent as whispers, descended through the thin Martian atmosphere with the grace of falling leaves. Morrison's training kicked in immediately, his rifle finding its way to his hands faster than conscious thought could process the threat. Control, we have incoming. 3 unidentified vessels approaching from the northwest quadrant. His voice cracked slightly, not from fear, but from a sheer impossibility of what he was witnessing. The ships landed with barely a whisper, their surfaces shimmering like oil on water. No heat signatures, no engine noise, nothing that made sense according to human understanding of physics. They just were, as if the universe had decided to drop a few presents on Mars and forgot to include the instruction manual. Inside the colony's command center, Dr. Patricia Vance nearly choked on her coffee. 23 years of xenobiology research, and the closest she'd come to alien contact was arguing with her colleagues about whether microbial life constituted a discovery worth publishing. Now, staring at the monitor displaying Morrison's feed, she realized that all her theoretical knowledge was about as useful as a chocolate teapot. "This is not a drill, people," she announced to the command staff, though her voice carried more excitement than alarm. "We have first contact. Someone wake up Commander Brooks. And, for the love of all things scientific, somebody check if our translation algorithms are worth the data they are stored on." The airlock on the nearest alien vessel opened with a soft hiss, and out stepped something that made Morrison's brain perform the intellectual equivalent of a blue screen error. Tall, elegant, with skin that seemed to shift between deep blue and violet, depending on the light, the being moved with purpose but not aggression. Its eyes, large and multifaceted like cut gems, surveyed the human colony with what Morrison could only interpret as curiosity mixed with concern. Well, Morrison muttered to himself, there goes the neighborhood property values. The alien approached slowly, its hands, or what Morrison assumed were hands, held open in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. When it spoke, the words came through a small device attached to its chest, translating its melodic language into crisp, accented English. "Greetings, inhabitants of the Red World. I am Ambassador Keth of the Luminal Collective. We come not as conquerors, but as neighbors bearing gifts and bearing burdens in equal measure." Morrison lowered his weapon slightly, though he kept it ready. "Gifts and burdens? You sound like my ex-wife during divorce proceedings." The ambassador's expression, insofar as Morrison could read it, seemed amused. "Your humor translator works remarkably well. We have been observing your struggles on this world. Your determination is admirable, though your methods are inefficient." "Inefficient?" Morrison raised an eyebrow. "Buddy, we are not exactly working with the latest and greatest here. Half our equipment was outdated when we left Earth, and the other half has been jury-rigged so many times it's held together by prayer and duct tape." By now, a crowd had gathered. Dr. Vance arrived breathlessly, her tablet clutched to her chest like a shield. Commander Brooks stumbled out of the command center, his hair sticking up at odd angles and his uniform hastily thrown on. The entire colony, all 47 souls, pressed against windows and doorways to witness humanity's first interstellar diplomatic encounter. Ambassador Keth gestured toward his ships. We possess technology that could transform your colony into a thriving settlement. Atmosphere processors that work, hydroponic systems that produce abundance rather than disappointment, energy sources that do not require constant maintenance and creative profanity. Okay, now you have my attention, Commander Brooks said, stepping forward and attempting to smooth down his rebellious hair. What's the catch? Because in my experience, nobody offers something for nothing, especially not aliens who show up unannounced with ships that make our best technology look like Stone Age cave paintings. The ambassador's posture shifted slightly, and Morrison noticed what might have been the alien equivalent of a sigh. The burden we carry is this. Our people face extinction at the hands of a species we call the Devourers. They consume worlds, strip them of life, and move on like a cosmic plague. We have fought them for centuries, but our nature is not suited for warfare. We are builders, creators, gardeners of life. They are destroyers, and they are winning. Dr. Vance stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding her caution. You are asking us to fight for you. Not for us, Keth corrected. With us. Your species has a reputation throughout this sector of space. You are young, yes, but you possess something we and most other civilizations have long since bred out of ourselves. The capacity for controlled violence in service of protection. You call it warfare, but we see it as controlled chaos directed toward preservation. Morrison snorted. Controlled chaos? You have been watching too many human war movies. Most of the time, we are just making it up as we go along and hoping nobody notices. That is precisely what makes you so effective, Keth replied. You adapt, you improvise, you find solutions where others see only problems. The Devourers have conquered 17 systems because they face species that follow predictable patterns. You follow no patterns at all. Commander Brooks ran a hand through his hair again, making it even more disheveled. Let's say we are interested, and I'm not saying we are, but hypothetically speaking, what exactly would this partnership look like? The ambassador gestured again, and one of the other ships opened to reveal glimpses of technology that made the assembled humans' collective jaws drop. Crystalline panels that hummed with energy, atmosphere processors the size of briefcases that somehow managed to do the work of their building-sized counterparts, food synthesizers that could apparently turn base elements into gourmet meals. We provide the tools for your survival and prosperity. You provide tactical knowledge and strategic thinking for our survival. A fair exchange, we believe. And if we say no, Dr. Vance asked, though she was clearly already sold on the idea, that Keth's expression became somber. Then you continue your current path toward slow extinction on this world, and we continue ours toward fast extinction at the hands of the Devourers. Neither outcome benefits anyone. Morrison looked around at his fellow colonists, faces that had grown gaunt from ration meals, eyes that had lost the spark of hope that originally brought them to Mars. The colony wasn't just dying, it was already mostly dead, running on fumes and stubborn human refusal to admit defeat. How long do we have to decide? Commander Brooks asked. The Devourers will reach this system in approximately 6 of your months. Whether you choose to stand with us or continue your isolated struggle, that timeline remains unchanged. The weight of the statement settled over the colony like Martian dust, pervasive and inescapable. 6 months. 6 months to either accept alien charity and join an interstellar war, or continue their slow march toward irrelevance on a planet that seemed determined to kill them. Dr. Vance was the first to break the silence. What exactly are these Devourers? I mean, specifically, are we talking about a warrior race, machines, something else entirely? Ambassador Keth's skin shifted to a darker hue, and Morrison got the distinct impression that this was the alien equivalent of a frown. They are biological entities, but changed, enhanced. They were once a civilization, much like yours, actually, curious, expansionist, determined. But they encountered something in the void between galaxies, something that transformed them into what they are now. They consume not just resources, but the essence of life itself. Entire planets become barren husks in their wake. Zombies, Morrison said flatly. You are describing space zombies. I am unfamiliar with that term, but if it refers to beings that consume the living to sustain themselves, then yes, your comparison is apartment. Commander Brooks laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that came from staring into an abyss and realizing the abyss was laughing back. This just keeps getting better. So our choices are slowly die on Mars or quickly die fighting space zombies alongside aliens who admit they're terrible at warfare. Did I miss anything? You missed the part where we might actually win, Dr. Vance said, her excitement building. Think about it. This is exactly what humans do best. We take impossible situations and somehow muddle through them. We have been doing it since we climbed down from the trees and decided that mammoth hunting was a reasonable career choice. Morrison looked at the ambassador. These devourers, how do they typically attack? What's their standard operating procedure? Keth's device translated what sounded like approval. They arrive in massive fleets, overwhelm planetary defenses through sheer numbers, then deploy biological agents that convert the population into more of themselves. The process is unpleasant, but they follow patterns, Morrison pressed. Standard tactics, predictable deployment strategies. Yes, it is their greatest strength and, we hope, their greatest weakness. Morrison grinned, and it wasn't a nice expression. Then they have never fought humans before. We specialize in being unpredictable. It's like our whole thing. The ambassador's posture straightened slightly. You are considering our proposal? Commander Brooks looked around at his people, seeing the mixture of hope and terror in their faces. We need time to discuss this, and we need more information. A lot more information. Of course, we will remain in orbit while you deliberate. But remember, the clock is already ticking. 6 months may seem like a long time, but preparing for interstellar warfare requires more than good intentions and human stubbornness. As the ambassador returned to his ship, the colonists stood in stunned silence, watching the sleek vessels rise back into the rust-colored sky. The weight of the decision ahead of them was overwhelming, but for the first time in months, there was something else in the air besides despair. There was possibility, and sometimes Morrison thought as he watched the ships disappear into the Martian sunset, possibility was all humans needed to do something absolutely crazy. Something like saving the galaxy. 3 weeks later, Jake Morrison found himself standing in what used to be the colony's failing hydroponics bay, now transformed into something that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie. The luminal technology hummed quietly in the background, producing more food in a day than the old system managed in a month. It should have felt like a miracle. Instead, it felt like accepting a deal with very polite devils. Still having second thoughts, Dr. Vance asked, entering with a steaming cup of what the food synthesizer claimed was coffee. It actually tasted better than the recycled sludge they'd been choking down for months. Third and fourth thoughts, Morrison admitted, watching rows of vegetables grow at speeds that defied everything he knew about agriculture. Don't get me wrong, this tech is incredible. But every time I see how easily they have solved our problems, I wonder what kind of problems we are walking into. The debate had raged for those 3 weeks. Some colonists, led by engineer Marcus Wright, argued for accepting the alliance immediately. Others, including geologist Lisa Park, insisted they needed more information before committing humanity to an interstellar war. The arguments had grown heated, desperate, and occasionally creative in their profanity. Commander Brooks had finally called for a colony-wide vote. The result, 26 in favor, 21 opposed. Not exactly a ringing endorsement for species-wide military commitment, but it was enough. Speaking of problems, Morrison continued, have you seen the latest intelligence briefings from Ambassador Keth? Dr. Vance's expression darkened. The Luminal Collective had been remarkably forthcoming with information about their enemy, perhaps too forthcoming. The Devourers weren't just another hostile alien species. They were something that had once been recognizably civilized, transformed into biological weapons of mass extinction. The neural integration process, Vance said quietly. That's what keeps me awake at night. the way they convert conquered populations into more of themselves. It's not just death, it's theft of identity. Morrison nodded grimly. According to luminal records, the Devourers had once been called the Kavari, a species not unlike humans in their curiosity and expansion drive. They'd encountered something in the void between galaxies, something the luminals called the hunger. Whatever it was had rewritten their biology, their psychology, their entire civilization into a consuming plague that spread from world to world. The worst part, Morrison said, is that they are still intelligent, still capable of strategy and planning. They are not mindless zombies. They are corrupted geniuses with a taste for genocide. The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted their conversation. Ambassador Keth entered the hydroponics bay, his violet skin shifting to a more golden hue that Morrison had learned indicated curiosity or mild approval. Your people adapt remarkably quickly to new technology, Keth observed, examining the flourishing plants. Most species require months to integrate luminal systems safely. You managed it in weeks. We are motivated by impending doom, Morrison replied dryly. It's amazing what humans can accomplish when the alternative is extinction. So, what brings you down from orbit today? Please tell me it's good news. Keth's skin darkened slightly. I wish it were. Our long-range sensors have detected scout vessels entering the outer system. The Devourers have arrived early. The words hit like a physical blow. Dr. Vance's coffee cup slipped from her hands, shattering on the floor in a spray of ceramic and synthetic caffeine. How early? Morrison demanded, his military training taking over. 4 months ahead of schedule. They must have detected our presence here and accelerated their timeline. We have perhaps 3 weeks before their main fleet arrives. Morrison felt something cold settle in his stomach. 3 weeks to prepare for a war against an enemy that had conquered 17 star systems. 3 weeks to turn a dying Mars colony into humanity's first line of defense against cosmic horror. Well, he said, surprising himself with how calm his voice sounded, I guess we'd better get to work. The next 72 hours transformed Colony 7 from a struggling settlement into something that looked like organized chaos had collided with advanced alien technology. Luminal engineers worked alongside human technicians, installing shield generators, weapon systems, and defensive platforms with an efficiency that bordered on the supernatural. Marcus Wright, the colony's lead engineer, found himself coordinating with beings whose technology he barely understood, but whose dedication matched his own. The defensive grid should be operational within 48 hours, he reported to Commander Brooks during one of their increasingly frequent strategy meetings. Should be isn't good enough, Brooks replied, his hair now permanently disheveled from stress. These Devourers don't strike me as the type to give us partial credit for effort. Lisa Park, who had been among the most vocal opponents of the Alliance, now threw herself into geological surveys with the passion of someone who had accepted that opposition was a luxury they couldn't afford. The canyon networks could provide natural choke points, she explained, projecting holographic maps that showed Mars terrain in unprecedented detail. If we can funnel their ground forces into kill zones, assuming they use ground forces, Morrison interrupted. Everything we know about their tactics comes from luminal records, and the luminals admit they are terrible at warfare. We might be preparing for the wrong kind of fight entirely. Dr. Vance looked up from her analysis of Devourer biological samples that the luminals had provided. Actually, Jake might be right. These organisms are adapted for conversion, not destruction. They need living hosts to expand their numbers. That means ground assault is likely, regardless of their space-based capabilities. Ambassador Keth, who had taken to spending most of his time in the colony rather than his ship, nodded approvingly. Your tactical analysis is sound. The Devourers prize efficiency above all else. They will seek to convert your population while minimizing damage to infrastructure they can use. So they want to keep us alive long enough to turn us into more of them, Morrison said. How thoughtful. I'm touched by their consideration. The sarcasm helped, but only slightly. The reality of their situation was becoming clearer with each passing hour. They weren't just fighting for the colony or even for Mars. They were fighting for the concept of human independence in a galaxy where two choices seemed to exist: join the Luminal Collective's peaceful expansion, or be consumed by the Devourer Plague. "There is something else," Keth said, his skin shifting to patterns that Morrison had learned indicated discomfort. "Something we have not shared with other species we have approached for alliance." The room fell silent. Dr. Vance looked up from her microscope, and Commander Brooks stopped trying to organize his unruly hair. "The Devourers are not merely expanding randomly," Keth continued. "They're searching for something. Our analysis of their movement patterns suggests they're tracking the source of the original hunger signal, the entity or phenomenon that transformed the Kavari in the first place." Morrison felt the temperature in the room drop several degrees. "And you think it's in this system? We think it is in this galaxy. The Devourer's expansion has been directed, purposeful. They're not simply consuming worlds. They're following a trail that leads toward the galactic core. Your solar system lies directly along that path. So we are not just a random target," Dr. Vance said slowly. "We are a waypoint on their road to something much worse." "Precisely. If they succeed in finding and joining with the original hunger, the transformation they underwent will seem minor by comparison. Every species in this galaxy will face the same choice: conversion or extinction." The weight of this revelation settled over the assembled humans like a blanket made of lead and despair. They weren't just fighting for their own survival anymore. They were fighting for every thinking species in the galaxy, whether those species knew it or not. "No pressure," Morrison muttered. Commander Brooks straightened his shoulders, a gesture that somehow made his disheveled appearance seem more authoritative rather than less. "All right, people. New mission parameters. We're not just defending a colony anymore. We are buying time for the galaxy to figure out what's coming and prepare for it." "How do we do that?" Lisa Park asked. "We are 47 humans with alien technology we barely understand, facing an enemy that's conquered entire star systems." Morrison grinned, and this time was a genuinely pleasant expression. "We do what humans do best. We cheat." Over the next 2 weeks, Colony 7 became something that would have been impossible to imagine just months earlier. Human ingenuity combined with luminal technology in ways that surprised even Ambassador Keth. The defensive installations weren't just copied from luminal designs. They were modified, improved, and in some cases completely reimagined. Marcus Wright had taken to working 18-hour days, installing shield generators and patterns that created overlapping fields of protection while simultaneously providing offensive capabilities. "If you can't tell the difference between defense and offense," he explained to anyone who would listen, "your enemy can't either." Lisa Park's geological surveys had revealed cave networks that could serve as both civilian shelters and hidden weapon emplacements. "Mars has been trying to kill us since we got here," she said while marking tunnel entrances on tactical maps. "Time to return the favor." Dr. Vance's biological research had yielded something even more valuable: a potential weakness in devourer physiology. Their neural integration process requires direct physical contact, she explained during a briefing that had become equal parts scientific lecture and military planning session. "The conversion organisms can't survive Mars' atmospheric conditions for more than a few minutes without a host. So if we can keep them from touching us, we win." Morrison asked, "If we can keep them from touching anyone, period?" Conversion process is exponential. One successful integration becomes two becomes four, and so on. We can't afford a single breach. Ambassador Keth had been unusually quiet during these preparations, observing human problem-solving with what Morrison interpreted as fascination mixed with concern. Finally, he approached Morrison privately. "Your species approaches warfare unlike any we have encountered," Keth said. "Most civilizations develop increasingly sophisticated weapons and defensive systems. You develop increasingly sophisticated ways to make your enemies defeat themselves." Morrison considered this. "It's called asymmetric warfare. When you can't match your enemy's strengths, you make their strengths into weaknesses. Basic military strategy. Basic for humans, perhaps. Most species that survive to achieve interstellar travel have moved beyond such creative approaches to conflict resolution. Maybe that's why they keep losing to the Devourers, Morrison suggested. Sometimes the old ways work better than the new ones. The morning of the 20th day brought news that no one wanted to hear, but everyone had been expecting. Long-range sensors detected the arrival of the Devourer main fleet. 12 massive bioships that looked more grown than built, accompanied by clouds of smaller vessels that moved with the coordinated precision of a swarm intelligence. Well, Commander Brooks announced over the colony-wide communication system, "This is it. Today we find out if human stubbornness is stronger than alien hunger. I'm betting on stubbornness." The battle began not with explosions or dramatic charges, but with silence. The Devourer fleet took position in high orbit and simply waited, scanning the planet's surface with sensors that made the colonists feel like specimens under a microscope. Then they began to descend. The first wave consisted of atmospheric scouts, organisms that looked like flying jellyfish crossed with surveillance drones. They swept across Mars' surface, mapping defensive positions and identifying population centers with methodical precision. "They're learning our layout," Morrison reported from his position in the command center, watching displays that showed dozens of contacts moving across the Martian landscape. Just like Keth said, they prize efficiency. They want to know exactly what they are dealing with before they commit to an assault. "Let them look," Dr. Vance replied from her position, monitoring biological sensors. "They will see what we want them to see." The deception had been Morrison's idea, inspired by a combination of human military history and sheer bloody-minded creativity. Colony 7's actual defensive positions were hidden, camouflaged using a combination of luminal stealth technology and old-fashioned human ingenuity. What the Devourers were seeing was an elaborate dummy settlement, complete with fake life signs and simulated defensive installations. "Contact!" Lisa Park's voice crackled through the communication system from her position in the Geological Survey Station. Multiple bogies incoming from Sector 7. The real battle began with the landing of the first Devourer assault pods. They struck the planet's surface like meteors, disgorging creatures that moved with purpose and terrifying coordination. Bipedal, roughly humanoid in shape, but clearly modified for combat and conversion. They advanced on the dummy colony with mechanical precision. "Now," Commander Brooks ordered. The hidden defensive installations came online simultaneously, revealing themselves just long enough to unleash concentrated fire on the advancing Devourers. The effect was devastating. Caught in overlapping fields of fire from positions they hadn't detected, the first wave of attackers was eliminated in seconds. But Morrison knew this was just the beginning. The Devourers would adapt, learn, modify their approach. That's what made them so dangerous. "Second wave incoming," Park reported, twice as many as the first. The battle raged for 6 hours. Wave after wave of Devourer forces landed, probed the defenses, and were repelled. But each attack was more sophisticated than the last. The enemy was learning, adapting, finding weaknesses in the human defensive strategy. "They're starting to figure us out," Morrison reported, watching tactical displays that showed Devourer forces beginning to avoid the most obvious kill zones. "We need to change tactics." "Already on it," Marcus Wright replied from his position coordinating the mobile defense platforms. Switching to Pattern Delta. Pattern Delta was pure human chaos. Instead of maintaining fixed defensive positions, the colonists began moving, relocating weapons and shield generators in seemingly random patterns that made no sense to anyone who hadn't grown up playing human strategic games. The effect on the Devourers was immediate and dramatic. Accustomed to facing opponents who followed logical, predictable patterns, they found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to make tactical decisions based on coin flips and creative profanity. "It's working," Dr. Vance announced, monitoring Devourer communication frequencies. "Their coordination is breaking down. They're trying to process tactical information that doesn't make sense according to their strategic models." But the victory was temporary. As the battle entered its 7th hour, the Devourers adapted again, this time abandoning their coordinated approach in favor of something that Morrison recognized with growing dread: They are going for saturation attack, he announced. Forget strategy, forget coordination. They're just going to throw everything they have at us and see what sticks. The final assault was overwhelming in its simple brutality. Every remaining Devourer vessel disgorged its contents simultaneously, creating a tide of hostile organisms that swept across the Martian landscape like a biological tsunami. Shields failing in sectors 3 and 7. Wright reported, his voice tight with strain. Backup generators coming online. Park added, though the strain in her voice suggested that backup wasn't going to be enough. This was it, Morrison realized. The moment when human creativity met its limits and either broke through to something greater or simply broke. All units, this is Morrison, he announced over the general communication channel. Time for the final card. Execute Plan Crazy Ivan. Plan Crazy Ivan was so named because it was the kind of strategy that only made sense if you were either completely insane or completely human. Instead of continuing to defend fixed positions, the colonists abandoned their installations entirely and retreated into the cave networks that Lisa Park had mapped. But they didn't just retreat. They turned the entire surface colony into a massive trap. The Devourers, following what they perceived as fleeing prey, swarmed into the colony's installations just as Marcus Wright triggered the final surprise. Every piece of luminal technology in the settlement overloaded simultaneously, creating a chain reaction that turned the entire colony into a brief, brilliant star. The explosion was visible from orbit. When the dust settled, literally and figuratively, the surviving colonists emerged from their underground shelters to find the Martian surface scoured clean of Devourer forces. The enemy fleet, apparently convinced that the entire human population had been eliminated in the explosion, began to withdraw. Did we win? Dr. Vance asked, her voice hollow with exhaustion and disbelief. Ambassador Keth, who had remained in the underground command center throughout the battle, looked at the tactical displays with something that might have been awe. You did not win, he said slowly. You did something far more important. You taught the Devourers that they can be defeated. Morrison looked at the readings showing the enemy fleet moving toward the outer system. They will be back. Yes, Keth agreed. But next time, they will hesitate. They will doubt. And doubt is something the Devourers have never experienced before. Dr. Vance managed a tired smile. So we didn't save the galaxy. No, Morrison replied, watching the last of the enemy ships disappear into the black. We just gave it a fighting chance. As the survivors of Colony 7 began the long process of rebuilding, they carried with them the knowledge that they had accomplished something unprecedented in galactic history. They had faced the Devourers and lived to tell about it. More importantly, they had proven that the seemingly unstoppable plague could be stopped. It wouldn't be the last battle. It might not even be the most important one. But it was the first time in centuries that someone had looked at the Devourer tide and said, not today. And sometimes, Morrison thought as he watched the sun set over the scarred but unbroken Martian landscape, that was exactly what the galaxy needed to hear. The story of humanity's first interstellar war had begun. It would be written in blood, sacrifice, and stubborn refusal to accept defeat. But most of all, it would be written in the fundamental human belief that impossible odds were just another word for interesting challenge. The Devourers had learned something new about the galaxy. It contained a species crazy enough to blow up their own colony just to make a point. The galaxy was about to learn something new about humanity. They were just getting started.